Exchange rates. Exchange rates refer to the rate at which one country's currency can be exchanged for another. So we use dollars in the United States, but in the Eurozone, countries use euros as their unit of currency. In Great Britain, they use the pound. A number of countries use their own national dollars. In Japan, they use the yen. What I've listed here in this table is the current exchange rates as of April 2015 for various currencies against the U.S. dollar. Right now, with $1, I can buy 0.92 euros. This fluctuates over time. Just a few years ago, it was more like a dollar would buy about 0.8 euros. Right now, we can buy 0.66 British pounds with $1. We can buy 1.22 Canadian dollars. This was very close to parity, $1 Canadian dollar for a U.S. dollar just a couple of years ago. So currencies fluctuate over time. They rise and they fall. These exchange rates between currencies rise and fall across time. Over time, currency rises and falls. When a currency appreciates, you can buy more foreign currency with it. This is called strengthening. And when a currency strengthens, the domestic goods become more expensive and foreign goods become cheaper. This generally leads to more imports coming in to the country with the stronger currency and fewer exports leaving. This will tend to widen trade deficits. This is one of the things that helps equilibrate the global economy. If one country is struggling, their currency can weaken, and they can use foreign demand for their goods and services to bring their economy back into balance. If a currency is weakening, this can be used to increase the amount of exports that a country can generate and bring their GDP back to equilibrium. So exchange rates and currency appreciation are one thing that can stabilize the global economy. When a currency depreciates, this means you can buy less foreign currency with it, and this is called weakening. So when the exchange rate falls, the currency is said to be depreciating. On the previous slide, we were looking at nominal exchange rates, so the price of one currency in terms of another. But it's also interesting to think about the real exchange rate, which would be the relative price between goods and services in one country for another. And the real exchange rate is given by the exchange rate times the domestic price divided by the foreign price that we're talking about. We'll do an example in just a second. So the nominal exchange rate is what we looked at on the previous slide. How many units of, say, a euro can a dollar buy? The real exchange rate also makes indications for the price level. Price levels will tend to be different in one country. The price expressed in euros should not be the same as the price expected in dollars, and certainly not the same as the price of yen or pesos. Here's an example. Suppose a Big Mac costs $2.50 in the United States, but 400 yen in Japan. And the exchange rate is $120 yens per dollar. That is, every dollar can purchase 120 yen. If we want to compute the real exchange rate, then what we need to do is use these differences in nominal prices combined with the nominal exchange rate to obtain our measure of the real exchange rate. So work through this calculation. The exchange rate times the price. For $2.50, I could buy 300 yen. That means that for 300 yen, I can buy a U.S. Big Mac. So I multiply the exchange rate times the domestic price to obtain to identify how many units of the foreign currency it would take me to buy enough dollars to buy a Big Mac in the United States. In the denominator of our expression, we look at how much it costs in the foreign currency to buy a Big Mac. So in Japan, it costs us 400 yen to buy a Big Mac. Now, when we put the calculations together, we see that we can buy 0.75 Japanese Big Macs for each U.S. Big Mac that we could buy. If I had 300 yen, I could buy a Big Mac in the U.S. I could buy 3/4 of a Big Mac in Japan. So 0.75 Japanese Big Macs represents the relative price or the real exchange rate for a U.S. Big Mac. It may seem unusual that a Big Mac would sell for a different real price in one country than another. And if this leads to some level of confusion, if a real exchange rate might be something different than one for one, this might lead to some level of confusion. And in fact, this is worth taking a deeper look at. Sometimes in economics we talk about the law of one price, and the law of one price says that prices should not allow for arbitrage opportunities, basically, that prices should tend to be the same, the real price of goods should tend to be the same across nations. The real exchange rate should be something approximately close to one for one. And here's an example of why we think that this might be the case. For example, textbooks sell for 50 British pounds in the UK, say, or $100 in the United States, and let's say that the exchange rate is 0.66 pounds per dollar. That is, each dollar can buy 0.66 pounds. If the prices are different, as we expressed it before, then there's an opportunity for arbitrage. We can buy the books in the UK and resell them here in the United States. We do this by buying 50 pounds for $75. We start with $75 and use it to buy 50 pounds. With this 50 pounds, we buy a book in the UK, and we turn around and sell this book in the United States for $100. So we started with $75, bought a book in a foreign currency in a foreign country, and resold it here for $25 in profit. The law of one price says that this shouldn't happen. And you can think about reasons why prices might be different across space related to transportation costs and such. But if these opportunities are too large, then we should expect to see arbitrage. And in fact, I hear from many students that they look for international textbooks and take advantage of price differences across space. What economists have done to account for some of these differences in real exchange rates and in prices across countries is to think about something called purchasing power parity and use measures of purchasing power parity to examine differences in the real cost of a bundle of goods and services across different nations. So purchasing power parity is an explanation of exchange rates where a unit of currency should be able to buy the same quantity of goods in all countries, right? So rather than looking at one good like we did with Big Macs or textbooks, they look at a bundle of goods and say, okay, how can we adjust the currency to account for differences in purchasing power across space? What we should expect is that nominal exchange rates adjust to equalize the price of this basket of goods across countries. This is our purchasing power parity story. The nominal exchange rate between countries should equal the ratio of their price levels between countries. So the nominal exchange rate should represent the foreign price level divided by the domestic price level. And the price levels are usually measured in say, the Consumer Price Index in the United States or other measures of inflation that are used other measures that are used to measure inflation and the price level in foreign countries. We use purchasing power parity measures to adjust income levels to reflect differences in standards of living. We should note that there are some limitations of purchasing power parity and that not all goods tend to follow the law of one price. Some goods are very difficult to arbitrage. We can't trade, for instance, land across nations. We can't buy and sell open pieces of property and simply move them from, say, Lithuania to downstate Illinois. Also, a haircut, you can imagine, is the classic example of a non-tradable good. Somebody in Australia can't get their haircut and then trade it to me. Also, it's important to note that foreign and domestic goods aren't always perfect substitutes in the bundle, and so measures of purchasing power parity are not always enough to account for differences between nominal and real exchange rates.